I think that we all have that issue when we grow up is, are we going to be like our parents or not? And when you have a parent that's very passionate about their career, about what they're into, of course they want their family to be a part of it. In my case, I had 4 sisters and myself. My father never forced any of us to do martial arts. We had 2 martial arts families who were involved, my dad's family and another group of family. And that family was raised where everybody was forced to do martial arts. And so when my dad saw that, he didn't want to force his family to do martial arts, so he gave that as an option. So what we did was, we would go up to the karate studio, we'd take a couple lessons, and if it was for us, we'd continue. And if it wasn't, then he'd try again a couple years later. I was more interested in getting my dad to acknowledge what my skills and talents were, and once he did, at the age of 19, I drew a portrait of him. I'm a professional artist, and when he acknowledged me as being the artist, from that day forward, I said, now I'll take karate from you. Now I'll take Kenpo. So from the age of 19 till he passed away when I was 30, I studied with him. And I enjoyed it. We had a great relationship. He was a great father. He was a lot of fun. Very smart man, very intense man at times, but at the same time, if you're ever with him, couldn't have had a more fun time. He loved to laugh, loved to eat, and he loved to make people enjoy his presence, and so he did a good job of it. My dad was a perfectionist, so that's kind of a dual question there, because sometimes he's happy with some things and other things he wasn't. He had a lot of problems with politics of martial arts, which we all do. It's always trying to satisfy somebody's past or somebody's issues, or if they train with somebody, and I think that's what was the most hard on him, because he would rather teach than try to solve people's political problems. So I know that was a big burden on him, but nothing made him more happy than people got his material. He would love it when he was on the mat. They understood it, they could move into advanced material, and that's what made him happy. So, but he wasn't really happy with the way that the whole ranking thing about people's ranking or their political position in the community. That was always a struggle for him. I think that for me too. It's just, I guess it's like, do you want to spend your time talking or working out? And from our point of view, it's like talk belongs on a mat physically.
As you got older, did you begin to
change my own direction?
Yeah,
of course. I think that's also what happens. Either we want to be exactly like our parents or we don't. And in my case, I didn't want to be like my dad at all. Not that I was against him in any way, I just wanted my own uniqueness and my own direction. But I think that I wound up becoming more like him than I thought, not in terms of the art, but in terms of the way he thought. He was an evolutionary guy, he was a progressive thinker. The art of Kenpo changed 4 times while he was alive. There was a version of Chinese Kenpo that he learned, and he created a version called American Kenpo. He created 3 versions in his lifetime of the art he created. And what I did was, when I trained with him, I didn't train like the typical martial artist did. I didn't train in a gi. I didn't train at a karate studio. I trained in our living room and in our backyard. So I had more of the Mr. Miyagi kind of training. And what happened was that at one point my dad was training me, and he says, "You know what, son? I really don't want to learn the choreography of the art. I want you to learn how to think." And so he taught me for about 8 years how to think like him, and how to go in that direction. And so what I've done in my own training is that, just as we see the evolution of martial arts, where there's an opening called MMA, and MMA was just the natural evolution of where we went for the aggressive side. And so I figured that we kind of tapped out, and I think that man has figured out all the variables of how to make things dangerous and aggressive. So if that's already been explored, I figured, why not explore the complete opposite side, and seeing the value of how to passively interact with physical bodies, and how you can get a different result versus the results that we get in a certain aggressive response. And that's what we've been exploring. What we're doing is called Paxal arts. The reason why I call it Paxal arts versus martial arts is martial arts has a philosophy of a win-lose. And by definition, I couldn't call what we're doing martial arts. We didn't have a definition for it, and the problem was that we didn't know what to call it. So when looking at how martial was named, it was named after the Roman god of war, who loved blood, loved death, loved the demise of man. And I was thinking, yeah, it's not exactly what we should be teaching our children is a martial thing. I mean, not that it has a whole different definition now, but it just bothered me that we're only putting the energy into that. So then I was thinking, well, maybe we need to evolve it. And so we start teaching our children a different angle of a win-win versus a win-lose. And because it didn't fit in the word martial, I had to come up with something that countered it. So it didn't exist. When realizing we have named martial after the Roman god of war, I figured why not name it after the Roman god of peace to counter it. Her name was Pax, and so taking MAR from martial and replacing with PAX, it's just Paxal. And the reason why we're doing that is to help round off a martial artist to know both sides of the coin. And that's what I've been developing and been working with. And the group here in Fresno, all most of them were able to take a class with me a couple times, and several of them certified. So we've been very successful with it, in small groups.
Is it harder to teach?
It depends. What's harder to teach? Sometimes it's not that they can't get the material down. It's the terminology to help their minds understand where to go, and But we've been pretty successful. I think the adults are having a harder time with it than the kids are. Yeah, because it's the way we're raised. We're raised to problem solve a certain way, and if you're not used to problem solving a certain way, you'll always revert back to the way you know how to problem solve. And it becomes difficult for somebody to kind of embrace the bigger picture of how to problem solve like that. But it's come along, and there's people who catch on. There's a guy who took a class of mine this morning. He said he took 4 classes with me, and this is the class he got it. So sometimes it takes a little longer for some, and sometimes it's pretty instant. No, I prefer working with people who are willing to work with me. I don't care if they're 80 or they're 2. It don't matter to me. If you want to learn, I'm here to teach you. And I learn from others too. I mean, I think the arrogant man thinks that all answers come from himself. And the smartest man is the one that realizes that if you use the collective mind, that's the smarter way to do it. So a good teacher will teach and throw out concepts and ideas that somebody else will come up with, and they'll present it. You don't tell them that they believe that you came up with the idea. And my dad was very notorious for doing that. He'd throw out a concept, might not have had the terminology right. He'd throw out a concept, and somebody would say, well, do you mean like the Fibonacci sequence or something like that? And he'd say, you're a smart guy. And then the next week he teaches as if he knew it. So he used those same terminology. So I think we as instructors, we always try to do that, to find the verbology that helps open up the minds in the right area. And it's just about being clever and getting people. It's about that learning curve. What's the shortest amount of time it takes for somebody to absorb it and to execute it the best way possible. And I think that the progressive state of martial arts is always trying to figure out how to cut that learning curve down. And I know that my dad was really adamant about trying to cut that learning curve down. And what he did was he did a thing called, he called it synonyms, and they're actually idioms or argots, but he called it a synonym in the way that he learned martial arts where it was like a technique was called Technique 1, Technique 2, Technique 3. After you get to Technique 22, you don't know the difference in numbers and what it meant. So he started to name a body part, like for instance, a mace was a fist, hair with feathers. And so when he named the techniques, it was more to be an auditory cue to help somebody get the material down. It didn't work for me because I'm not a musician, I'm an artist, so I need visual cues. So for my training, I did flashcards type thing so that you can use that because the visual cue is that. But I find that in today's culture, if we can combine auditory, tactile, and visuals at the same time, I added auditory cues and I added visual cues. And of course, on the mat is when you do out the physical cues, the learning curve, and get people involved in any kind of new material. I know my dad would have been involved in that if he lived long enough. He would have added that third element, a visual cue to the training.